What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to a new season of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host. They're letting me host. Sponsored by Prize Picks. We'll get to that read later. Joining me today was the prince that was promised, Lord Michael of House Clifford. How are we doing today, Cliffy?
Not too bad. Maybe Lord of the Tides, maybe some good tides for the NHL season, and hopefully better than some of the Valerians have been making out on House of the Dragon so far. Not here to talk about HBO, here to talk about NHL. Excited for a new season. You and I were talking just before the show. It's been over 6 months since you and I have done a show together. It doesn't feel like that long, but maybe it was just a quick summer or something like that, but it's always good to be back talking hockey, and I'm pretty excited for the season.
Yeah, I am really excited for hockey to be back. I ran out of things to do. Like, we ran out of good movies to watch over the summer. It was just, it got pretty stale there. I'm glad we are back. So with the new season, we have new faces in new places. It's a 2-game slate, so we got a little bit of leeway to talk about some stuff here. You expecting anything? We had the Avalanche beat the Lightning. I know the Lightning play tonight in the Stanley Cup, and then they kind of brought back the same team. There's a lot of teams made some big offseason moves. Anything sticking out on the page for you related to DFS wise?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm going to look for, just from a macro point of view, is goal scoring in the NHL, because last year was obviously a very high scoring season. It was the highest scoring season, I believe, in like 20 some years. But it was kind of a tale of two seasons. If you look at the first half of the season, I'd say the first 30 games up until Christmas, goal scoring was basically right in line with the year before, and just a little bit below the year before that. It was just the second half of the season after Christmas, maybe the final 50-ish games for most teams, where the goal scoring exploded. So, obviously last year was a weird year, a lot of COVID pauses and stuff like that, plenty of injuries, guys missing games. So I'm wondering, does the high goal scoring keep up that we saw from January on, or is it going to be more the first half of the season? Things like power play percentages and shot rates, like, are they going to be consistent to what we saw at the end of the season? That's kind of the big thing I'm looking for. Also, I want to see who's going to be kind of the next big team to break out, right? Because, we've been waiting for Colorado to kind of take that next step that Tampa Bay took a few years ago, right? And became one of the dominant teams in the NHL. Before that, you had the Penguins. Before that, you had Chicago and Los Angeles. So, who's going to be that next team that kind of steps up to dominate? I think you and I are kind of hoping it's one of the teams that we'll talk about today in the late slate, in the late game here. But does Los Angeles take another step? Does Edmonton? Edmonton certainly looks deeper, at least up front, than they have at any time in the last 15 or so years. Can they kind of solidify themselves as the next pseudo dynasty or something along those lines? Does Carolina, finally break through after being a fairly dominant regular season team for a few years now? Those are all top end teams, and it's kind of like which one is going to take the next step and just really assert themselves as the contender to a Colorado or a Tampa Bay or what have you. We'd like to say it's going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. Got to see them get past the first round. I don't know what else to say at this point. You really need them to kind of take that next step in the playoffs before you crown them as anything. But certainly a lot of top end teams, and I'm really excited to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit more wide open this year because the Avs were kind of like by the middle of the season. For a point, they were like, oh, maybe the Flames, and then they had just kind of fizzled out. But the Avs lost Kadri. That's a big loss. They have some center depth issues. If Newhook doesn't step up, like their center depth is going to be an issue. So, both conferences have some top end talent. So I'm excited to see how that shakes out. I see we got our first super chat of the season from our pal Saul Goodman, $4.99. Thank you very much. He says, winter is coming. Welcome back, boys. Yeah, congrats to you as well. I know you had a Millie Maker sweat on Sunday. Got beat by 8 Dallas Cowboy D teams. If the Rams scored a touchdown instead of getting sacked, he would have won the Millie. It's coming, but that was a good run. Sorry if the wound is still a little salty there, but that was a fun sweat. Yeah. So make sure, since you're tuning in, to give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. It is super important. Like, I know most of you guys in this chat, I see about 75 people in chat already do that, because the more likes and views we get, the more free content we can give you. And if you want to get into the premium stuff, we have a very good NHL promo code here. It's a promo code PowerPlay. It will get you 7 days of NHL Platinum for $7. If you can't afford $1 a day, you probably shouldn't be playing DFS in the first place. So if you got $7 lying around, I suggest doing it. It'll get you into the Discord. And man, that Discord has saved me so much money over the years with alerts with the late scratches and all that stuff. Man, we lay some pipe on every slate in that Discord. So get on in there. Promo code PowerPlay, 7 days for $7. So before we get into the games, this is a 2-game slate. Short slate, obviously. There's lots of different ways to go about it. Now, it's not super mispriced where I'm saying there's one really expensive line and then you have to find cheap fillers if you're going that route. I think, a lot of these lines are fairly similar. There's some goalie misprices on DK, specifically Igor. So on a slate like this, do you go with leverage here? Do you play the chalk? Do you eat the chalk? How are you going about it today?
I think one thing that's important to remember is on a short slate like this, when you're looking at maybe just 2 or 3 games, there's only going to be a couple avenues to the top, right? Like when you have 10 games or 12 games, you might have 5 or 6 different top lines, just have, monster nights, or, maybe throw in a couple second lines or a third line does incredibly well. Like there are going to be a lot of different ways to get to the top when unless, both games end up like 6-4 or something like that, or a 7-5 game for both tilts. There's only going to be so many, high-end fantasy scorers. So obviously ownership is always something you have to keep in mind. But at the same time, when you're only looking at 4 teams, the guys are going to get the goals or they're not. Like that's just kind of the way it is, right? Like maybe you have 3 top lines go off tonight and there's a bunch of different ways to get there. It definitely could happen. It's just not something that happens a lot. And so I would say, while we're going to use ownership, we're going to talk about our top stacks tool and our ownership, which are both included with the premium membership. I would just say, you said it a lot last year, and sorry about my shaking camera. There's a steamroller going on behind my house. So sorry, nothing I can do. Can't tell the construction guys to F off. So while we always keep ownership in mind, but like you said last year, when you're on a short slate like this, just play the best plays or play the plays that you want to use. If it's two chalky lines, and so be it. Because if those two chalky lines are the ones that do well tonight, you're going to end up doing well if you have the right defense goalie combination. If you don't have them, you're not going to cash. That's just kind of the nature of short slate tournament play. So it's kind of a cop out to say just play the best plays, but what are the best plays? We'll certainly talk about those. But one thing you want to do is try not to overthink it too much. Yes, maybe you're going to throw in a third liner as a one-off. If you're making a ton of lineups, maybe you're going to grab a fourth liner, from Tampa Bay or from Vegas. We'll talk about a fourth liner in Vegas that might have some value here tonight. But I just wouldn't try to galaxy brain it too hard on a short slate like this. People are going to score or they're not. There's only so many teams and so many fantasy points to go around. So that's just kind of my approach is if I can find a lineup that I like that projects reasonably well using either our lineup builder or fantasy cruncher, I'm probably just going to go with it and just not be super concerned with ownership when there's only 4 teams playing.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like, it's not like there's like just one stud on the slate where it's like, Alex Ovechkin on a 2-game slate is going to get 70% ownership. That's when it kind of like, maybe we can fade him, but like just play your guys. There's always ways to differentiate your lineup. So do it that way. Before we get into the game, as I mentioned on the top, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. Not available in my state, but if it is available in your state, you definitely need to check it out. It's a prop-based contest. No sharks. Fish are friends, not food. Optimizers or mass entries. You can put 5 players into a lineup, get up to 10x your entry fees. You can use, multiple sports across that. You don't have to just do one sport. And then you can click the link in the description of the show below to get 1 free month of Stokastic plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit using Prize Picks. And I wish we had it because there are a couple that I like tonight. Jacob Trouba's line on there is 2 shots on goal. I like the over there. Jonathan Marchessault, 2.5 shots. I also like the over there. I do like betting shot props. I wish I could do it on Prize Picks. But for whatever reason, everything's legal in New Jersey except for Prize Picks. So if you are doing that, you can parlay these things. For me, I'm going to go into the sports books and do shot props, but Prize Picks is where I am going, or where you're going, not I'm going. So let's get into the first game of the night. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning with a 2.8 total going into Madison Square Garden to face the Rangers. They have a 2.9 total. Since it is the first game of the season, let us discuss, some of the changes. The Rangers, they lost in the offseason. They lost Andrew Kopp, Ryan Strome, Tyler Mott, and they brought in Vitaly Kravtsov back from Russia. They signed Vinny Trocheck, and they signed Jimmy Vesey to a PTO. They're going to give Kravtsov a chance in the top 6, which is nice, playing with Panarin and Trocheck. I was pretty critical of Ryan Strome last year, but he did have very good numbers on the power play with them. I am a bit concerned of losing him on the power play. I know Trocheck can fill his spot good, but you wonder if that messes with the chemistry on the power play a little bit, which is important because the Rangers had a very, very good power play last year. They're kind of weak at 5-on-5, so hopefully the power play continuity is still there. On the Lightning side, they traded Ryan McDonough in the offseason for Felipe Myers, who's on the roster tonight. They also added Vladislav Nemestikov and Hayden Fleury, who's also in the lineup. Then they signed like half the roster to massive contract extensions. I don't think that's going to be DFS relevant this year, but coming up in the next few years, some of those contracts could age poorly. So going into this game, if you look at the top stacks tool, Lightning, top leverage, which means a couple of things, expecting heavy ownership on Igor Shesterkin, who's mispriced on DraftKings, 6,900. Also, Tampa Bay, possibly the lowest owned line of the night. So what are you doing with this game?
Yeah, I just want to start with the goalies real quick. This camera shaking is driving me nuts just looking at it. I can't imagine watching it on the show. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about that construction crew. The first thing to mention is the goaltending matchup, right? You have Igor Shesterkin going up against Andrei Vasilevsky. I think there are a lot of arguments that they're the top two goalies in the world right now. If you look at the last few years, between Igor and Vasilevsky, they're first and sixth in high danger save percentage at 5-on-5, second and fifth in goals saved above expected, according to Evolving Hockey, second and fourth in wins above replacement, over at Evolving Hockey, which is kind of an advanced stats website that we use sometimes. So, I mean, maybe you can argue Ilya Sorokin or UC Saros or something like that might be able to sneak in, but these are certainly two of the top four goalies in the league. And whenever you're going up against a goaltender like this, if you play DFS for a full season, it's just going to happen one night where a team looks great and they just get absolutely stonewalled by a goalie as good as this. And it's going to happen a lot if these guys play up to their talent this season. I mean, Shesterkin he turned in one of the best goaltending seasons we've ever seen last year. If he does that again, like he's, a hard trophy contender again, like he was last year. So I think we have to start with the goaltending. And you mentioned the mispricing off the top. Over on DraftKings, Igor Shesterkin I'll just quickly bring it up right there. Igor Shesterkin over on New York, 6,900 right here. He's the cheapest goalie on the slate, provided we don't get some funky business with a third stringer coming or something like that. So I think you're going to see a lot of ownership on Igor. But when I was looking at our ownership projections, they weren't as high as I expected. Like I thought we might see something bordering 50%, but on DraftKings, probably around 33, 35%. Maybe that comes up a little bit at, start of the season. Maybe you have some more casual players that are just going to go with the cheap goalie. But he's certainly going to be probably the highest owned goalie on DraftKings. Here's kind of the problem with taking a goalie like Shesterkin against the Tampa Bay Lightning is Tampa Bay doesn't shoot a lot, right? They were middle of the league in shots per minute last year, but I think they were seventh in goals scored. Like this is a team that has the players to look for a lot of quality shots rather than, ripping from the blue line or winging it from the boards and hoping for a rebound or something like that. So, we can argue about how good the Rangers defense might actually be, but I'm not sure this is one of those games where you see Tampa Bay pile up 41 shots or something like that, regardless. So that's kind of the push and pull of Shesterkin here is, yes, absolutely, you can go and shut out anybody in the league on any given night. I think you can say that about most any goalie in the NHL, but I think he's the best goalie in the league, and a lot of good teams are going to have a lot of bad nights against him. But on the flip side, if the Tampa gets two goals, 3 goals on 25 shots or 26 shots or something like that, I think he's not going to be very worth it in tournaments, especially when we look at the goalies in the late slate and potential shot volumes there. So, again, it's one of those situations I wouldn't worry about ownership. If you have a lineup where you like the savings you get at goalie with Shesterkin, I would just go in that direction. Certainly on FanDuel, it's a much more open question where he is expensive over on FanDuel. So, you certainly aren't forced to play in there, especially like I said, where Tampa is a team that focuses more on shot quality than shot quantity. So obviously Shesterkin, very much in play, as is Vasilevsky, but I'm not sure you see a ton of shots on goal in this game. In fact, if you look at our goalie stats, and I'll bring it up here real quick. We have Logan Thompson and Jonathan Quick both projected for the most saves. Basically, we have them projected for the most shot volume, right? So you can go with either goalie here. Goalies, anything can happen on a single night, but I wouldn't expect a ton of volume here. You're basically looking for 1 goal or 0 goals, and that could be tough where there's a lot of firepower on both sides. Getting to the forwards, Tampa's loaded up their top line. They've lined up Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. Now, obviously, those are their top 3 players, especially with Andre Palat having moved on to New Jersey. He was a pretty good winger, a good power play guy for them at times, but he's gone. Anthony Cirelli is hurt. He's not starting the year. So that's basically, 2/3 of a second line that's missing for Tampa. So they're just loading up the top line, hoping they can outscore. I certainly don't have a problem with that. And it's very important noting how much better Braden Point has been, production-wise with Nikita Kucherov, because Kucherov has had long stretches of injury over the last few years, right? 4.2 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 when Point and Kucherov are on the ice together. When Point's on the ice without him, that drops all the way down to 3. Now, 3 is still pretty good. But 4.2 is you're getting into that elite top line territory. And I think that makes a big difference here tonight. And, I know we talked about not worrying about ownership that much. But the top line, at least by our top stacks tool for Tampa Bay, is going to be a lot lower owned, particularly on DraftKings because of the price, right? No other line is above 17K. They're above 20K between Point, Stamkos, and Kucherov. And of course, if you add Victor Hedman into the mix, you're only getting way more expensive. So I think there's always a case for playing that Tampa top line when the 3 of them are skating together. I wrote up Kucherov for that reason in my Power Plays article up at Stokastic.com. You can go check it out under the NHL section. Here's my one slight issue is they're probably going to go into that Rangers top line tonight. Top line of Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, and Capo Caco. Now, I'm sitting here with a Rangers fan, so maybe he can illuminate a little bit more. But it seems like Caco has developed much quicker defensively than he has offensively so far in the NHL. I want to get your thoughts on him being on the top line. Like, I think it probably makes him better defensively. It makes it a tougher matchup for Tampa as opposed to, if they had Kravtsov up there, or maybe even if they moved Lafreniere up on the right wing or something like that. I think it makes him better defensively, but I'm not sure how much it helps offensively. What have you thought about, reports in training camp? What do you think about his game towards the end of the last season? Do you think he helps that line offensively at all?
Yeah, so I guess that's why they were trying Sammy Blais or Barclay Goodrow up on that top line, because they want a defensively sound right winger. Now, I'm surprised they broke up the kids line, because that line was dynamic in the playoffs. But Capo Caco has come into his own, especially on the defensive side. He's been defensively responsible, which is not something you can say for a lot of young, good forwards. So, and they also don't want to send out Panarin against top comp. So, yeah, I think Caco definitely helps them defensively. Offensively, it's kind of interesting because if he starts shooting the puck more, I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities to score. Just a matter of if he has the confidence to do that. So I do really like this Rangers iteration of the top line. And we talked about last year how we thought, Frank Vetrano being there was going to be awful, and then they just steamrolled everybody. So, like, on the offensive side, if Caco can kind of replicate what Vetrano does by shooting the puck, I think they can be a fairly decent line at both ends of the ice. Now, tonight, that's kind of a tough matchup. Like you said, going into that Tampa top line is not something you really want to do, but that does free up Trocheck, Panarin, Kravtsov to go up against the middle 6 of Tampa. That just is not the same as they were during their Stanley Cup runs.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially the Tampa third line. We'll talk about that in a second. Certainly not the line that it's been recently. Here's the thing with the Rangers top line. We'll talk about them and stacking them now. I mean, we may as well. It looks like they're going to carry a fair bit of ownership. We have them, slightly over 35% on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, Not as high, but still, around 23-25%. The thing with that Rangers top line is they're not great at 5-on-5, not scoring wise, right? 3.0 goals per 60 minutes in their last 1,800 minutes together. Again, like I just mentioned with Point, three goals per 60 minutes is good, but it's not great. Like I was looking at the Toronto top line over the last few years. They're at 4.1. Zuccarello and Kaprizov over in Minnesota, they're at 3.7 goals per 60 minutes. The old Boston full top line, over 4 goals per 60 minutes. So like the elite of the elite are generally 3.5, sometimes above 4 goals. 3 goals per 60 minutes isn't great, which is why I'm wondering, can Kakko help them offensively? Certainly if he helps them defensively, it'll help balance out the fact that they're not scoring a ton, and that helps the team. That doesn't help us for DFS, right? Like we don't want that line just clamping things down defensively and only scoring a goal every couple of games or something like that. So the point that I brought up in my Power Plays article and that you mentioned at the top of the show is missing Ryan Strome on that top power play, right? They did score less without him on that top power play unit over the last few years, but it's not a big sample. Like I think it was like 65 minutes or something like that. Like 65 minutes, it's not a lot when you're talking about a line that plays together. That's maybe 25 games worth of power play time. It's not a lot to hang your hat over. In fact, the expected goals were higher without Strome. So I'm wondering, can Vincent Trocheck kind of replacing Strome on that top power play unit and on that second line kind of help out? So let's talk about that Rangers second line real quick. It looks like they're going to carry a fair bit of ownership here tonight. Both Rangers' top 2 lines are amongst the worst leverage lines that we have over on DraftKings. But again, it's the matchup that I think that matters. And the matchup that they're going to be going into is that second line for Tampa Bay of Nick Paul, Alex Killorn, Brandon Hagel. Now, Killorn might be falling off a little bit. I think he's 33 years old. It's funny to say that about a guy that's 33. Like I'm 36, and I'm like, that guy's toast, man. I guess that's just the way sports go. But maybe Killorn's falling off a little bit. But Hagel and Paul certainly played pretty well together in a limited sample last year because both were acquisitions during the season by Tampa Bay, right? Like these guys were expected to kind of be that next third line that they had a few years ago with Gordon, Coleman, and Goodrow. So they did generate 3.5 expected goals per 60 minutes against 2.4 against. That's a very strong expected goal share, even in a small sample. Panarin and Strome typically didn't have very strong expected goals numbers. I think Vincent Trocheck will help in that regard. Much better defensive, well, not much better, but he's a better defensive player, I think, than Strome. I think he's a bit of a better, at least he's a better volume shooter, I think, than Strome is as well. So I think that'll help out a bit. But it's, you mentioned Vitaly Kravtsov starting on that second line. Panarin's not great defensively himself. Kravtsov is a question mark. He spent 2.5 years playing in the KHL, right? This is his first NHL action, I think, since 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still young, still looks like to be kind of a dual threat, playmaker, goal scorer, but it doesn't strike me like that might be a great defensive line. And that's where I wonder if that Tampa second line, they're coming in, reasonably owned, about 5-6%. I wonder if that small sample from last year carries over to this year and that Tampa second line carries the play a little bit. Do you have any thoughts? Because you and I were talking about Kravtsov and Panarin, and there was that video of Panarin doing a lot of extra work with Kravtsov. I think he realizes, as well as the rest of the team, that they need their right wingers to work out. They need Kakko to be a top 6 winger. They need Kravtsov to be a top 6 winger. It's kind of a weakness for them. And I think they're going to do everything they can to help Kravtsov succeed. But, what's that line actually going to look like when they play? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think they're going to be a liability defensively. On Panarin's best day, he's an average defender at best. He kind of floats through the neutral zone to be nice. So, I don't know. I think when you're attacking the Rangers, you're going to want to go at their middle 6 lines. You don't want to go into that top line, even if, their numbers aren't great. The second and third line defensive numbers are going to be worse. Like that kids line was really, really good in the playoffs. Removing Kakko and putting Barclay Goodrow there is just going to hurt them on both ends of the ice. So from a Rangers standpoint, attacking the Rangers, you're going to attack that middle six. It'll be interesting to see, when the Rangers are on the road, how coaches attack them, because most coaches, not the brightest bulbs, but hopefully, they'll realize that, put out your top comp against Panarin or, Hedel, and you'll probably score some more goals. So, yeah, I think, playing Hagel tonight, playing Colton, Nick Paul is interesting because they're coming in super low owned and they don't have, power play correlation. But there's that unknown of going into the Rangers. Yeah, and Igor's in net, but like if you get a 5% Brandon Hagel goal as like a one-off, even if you have Shesterkin in the lineup, yeah, then you're ahead of a lot of the field there. You have a Paul Hagel 2-man, and they get some action on the net. Even like you just need Hagel to hit the score sheet once or get some kind of bonus, and I think you're doing fine. So I think that if you want to play Tampa 1, I think that is perfectly fine. It's expensive, and you'll probably be on a unique path. But also playing that second line going into an unknown second line of the Rangers is a nice way to get a little bit different tonight.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say the only thing that worries me about Tampa is how they're going to allocate the minutes, because I think pretty safe to say the top line's probably going to play 20 minutes or thereabouts, right? Now, last year, the third line with Perry and Belmar and Maroon in them fluctuated, but they played 12, 13 minutes a night. Like that's more than, a lot of fourth lines play. So, now you're down to 26, 27 minutes of ice time left. That's not a lot of ice time to split between your second and third lines, right? So the only thing that I'm really worried about is that you see pretty spread out ice time between the second, third, and maybe even the fourth line from Tampa Bay, with the top line getting a lot of usage. But again, like we said earlier at the top of the show, there's only 4 teams to pick from here. So there's not going to be great ice time on all the players. Let's talk about that third line real quick. You brought up Barclay Goodrow. He's typically been a good middle six player for his career. He had a real bad year last year. The production was fine, but his defensive play certainly wasn't. The kid line, Hedel and Lafreniere did play with him a reasonable amount. Over 100 minutes, you're looking about 7 or 8 full games worth. And their expected goals numbers really, really suffered with Goodrow there. Now it's a new season. Hedel, I think, was one of the breakout stars of the playoffs last year, along with Bowen Byram. So maybe they do a lot better. I think that's kind of a good matchup going to that third line from Tampa Bay. Like Cole Koepke, Tampa keeps finding these 25-year-old guys that make the roster every year. But Vladislav Nemestikov, he's getting older, certainly not very good defensively. Ross Colton, I think, is a good offensive player, but I think the defense is very much in question. What do you think of that kid line going in with Goodrow? Like, do you see a better season from him? Do you think they might be worth rostering here tonight?
I was hoping Kaapo Kakko would be there with them, and I would have played them tonight for sure. Now, on DraftKings, Alexis Lafreniere is 2,800 coming in at 5%. Him and Hedel, 6,900 for the 2-man on DraftKings, around 5%. I think, if you want some exposure to this game, if you're looking to power play stack a later game, I think that's a decent 2-man. Lafreniere looked like he took some steps forward in the playoffs as well. Be interesting to see if that, confidence carries over. Now they are going to have to, carry Barclay Goodrow's slow big ass across the ice all the time. But I think Lafreniere, as we saw, he is a very good finisher. I think, Barclay Goodrow may hurt them a little bit, but you saw in the playoffs that Kaapo Kakko didn't really contribute much offensively. He just kind of stabilized them defensively. If Goodrow can stay defensively responsible, I think that third line can have some success. Now, when they get fully healthy and they start moving pieces around, I was kind of wishing with this lineup that Jimmy Vesey would be on that third line. He can at least skate a little bit. So I don't know. I like them tonight. I just, not a huge fan of Barkley Goodrow.
Yeah, I'm not either. That was just a weird contract that they gave to him. Was it like 7 years, $3.8 million a season or something like that? Like,
no, it was worse than that. It was like 6x6.
Was it? Oh, well, whatever it was,
Miserable.
it's starting to look a little bit rough. But yeah, I think, we both kind of like the top lines here tonight, but I agree. I think it's Tampa 2 and maybe Rangers 3 that if we're looking in the depth lines, those are probably the lines that we're looking at. For defensemen, I mean, the top 5 defensemen on the whole slate on DraftKings, by our projections at least, are only separated by about 1.5 points. That's one shot. It's really not a lot when we're looking at our deep projections. So it's kind of where you want to go with your ownership. I mean, the problem with some of the defensemen in this game, like well, not some of the defensemen. I'll just say it's Adam Fox. Problem with Adam Fox is his peripherals aren't great, right? So on FanDuel, I think perfectly fine, acceptable to use. Especially where it's something I mentioned in the Power Plays article that's up at Stokastic.com. Tampa Bay lost 3 regular penalty killers from last season. Anthony Cirelli, obviously, he's still injured. They traded Ryan McDonough, and Andre Palat went and signed in New Jersey. Those are 3 out of their 9 regular penalty killers. They're going to have to fill those spots. Maybe take some time for them to kind of get acclimated to each other. So, I'm not a big fan of the Fox one-off, but to the other point, Jacob Trouba looks to be carrying more ownership than him. I found that kind of curious. I do like Fox better just outright, though. Trouba certainly showed his peripheral prowess, let's say, last season. He's a guy that can put up the double bonus over on DraftKings. In the Power Plays article, the guy brought up is Eric Chernak. Zach Bogosian is on the injured reserve. Ian Cole got suspended until some investigation is cleared. So they're essentially dressing 2 guys that aren't expected to be their third pair, which lends me to think that top 4 is going to play more minutes than they typically would. So I like Eric Chernak on the blue line over on DK here tonight. I think Trouba's certainly fine on both sites, even though he is carrying a fair bit of ownership. I think that's kind of about it. Is like there aren't a lot of the medium guys that I like in this game. I think there's just not a lot of medium guys, at least over on DraftKings, right? You're either paying $5,400 and above for Trouba, or it's $3,400 below for Sergachev. So certainly don't mind Chernak here tonight. Don't mind the Fox one-off if that Rangers power play can kind of get rolling. There's nobody that's really sticking out to me price-wise over on FanDuel. I don't know if you have any thoughts about FanDuel here today. The expensive guys are expensive. Sergachev is going to carry some ownership. I think Keandre Miller is a little bit overpriced on FanDuel. But other than that, there just isn't a lot for defensemen from this game that I really like. Anything you like?
Yeah, I mean, Tampa plays their top 4 defensemen more anyway, and now you got 2 guys on the third pair that has never played with them, so they'll probably play 12, 13 minutes. The top 4 guys will play in the 20s. On the Rangers side, I will say on DraftKings, Keandre Miller does interest me if you want to pay down for a Rangers defenseman, just because he came into his own defensively last season, but he hasn't really shown his offense ability yet, which he has. And maybe he catches lightning in the bottle early this season and starts going crazy offensively. He does have to be the responsible one because Trouba is awful defensively. So maybe he stays at home a little bit, but I don't mind Keandre Miller as a one-off. I think from a one-off perspective on the Rangers, you take ownership out of the question. I think I would prefer Jacob Trouba over Adam Fox as a one-off, just because the peripherals will be there. And if Fox has a good game, it means the Rangers had a good game on the power play. So if I'm going to play Fox, I want some of the other power play guys with them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I see our chat mentioning Cal Foote. Expected to play on the top pair with Victor Hedman. Like, I don't have a problem playing him. Looks like he's probably not going to carry a lot of ownership here tonight. I would just keep in mind that just because you're playing with Victor Hedman doesn't mean you're going to play a lot of minutes. I point to Jan Ruda, who played, I think, 3 seasons besides Victor Hedman, or at least 2. He's in Pittsburgh now, but if you look at his ice time per game the last 3 seasons, 16-20 per game, 16 per game, 15.5 per game. It's Mikhail Sergachev that's going to play 21, 22 minutes. Eric Chernak's probably going to play about 21 minutes. Maybe because of those injuries and suspensions and trades and all that, maybe Foote sees some more ice time earlier in the season. But I think, the peripheral god himself, Hayden Fleury, might be a guy that I like for super cheap here as well. I don't have a whole lot else to say on this game. You got anything else?
No, we'll get to, a little bit more goalie talk at the end, but let's talk about BetMGM for a second. If you bet $10 tonight, win $200 if any team scores a goal tonight. It's basically just free money from a sportsbook. It has to be first-time BetMGM users. It can't be with a live bet. It has to be money line, so you do that. Seriously, if you don't have a BetMGM account, you should sign up for that. I already have one, but you know who doesn't? My wife. And we're going to sign her up tonight and get $200. Watch all these games go to a shootout. But yeah, BetMGM. Definitely check that out. It will probably be under the sportsbook promo tab on Stokastic.com. So check that out. And if you're going to do that, you might want to check out OddsShopper to do that. Make your best bets in 30 seconds or less with OddsShopper. With hundreds of bets featured daily, OddsShopper gives you the edge you need betting player props and games lines across all sports. With expected win percentage and ROIs included, OddsShopper features multiple projection methods, which will help you make the best bets available on the market. OddsShopper also features a parlay builder with optimized parlays and an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free, guaranteed profit bets that you can make across sportsbooks. What are you waiting for? Click the link in the video description below to sign up for free with OddsShopper and start making smarter bets now. Now, I will say, being the host, this is the second time I've ever hosted. I hosted a MMA live before lock a few months ago. Cliffy makes the ad reads look easy. It is not very easy to read these ad reads. Cliffy professional, Josh learning. Let's get to the second game of the night. We have the Vegas Golden Knights with 3.0 total heading into Los Angeles to face our Kings. The Kings have a 3.2 expected total. Now, the Kings didn't really lose anybody in the offseason. They added Kevin Fiala, and now they get Drew Doughty back healthy. They have Quinton Byfield and Gabe Vilardi and what's his face? Arthur Kaliev, a year older. This seems like a deep team, so we're all excited about them. We made like 4,000 bets on them in the preseason. On the Vegas side, they lost Max Pacioretty. They traded him. They had to get rid of some salary cap. He ended up getting hurt anyway. They lost Evgeny Dadonov to free agency, I believe, and then they added Phil the Thrill, Uncle Hot Dog Phil Kessel. So that is they're actually not as bad as a team as I thought they were going to be. They do have some weakness on the left side, which we'll get to, but Vegas is running out Riley Smith, Jack Eichel, Phil Kessel as a top line, which could be fun offensively. It also could be an adventure defensively. On the Kings side, Fiala is going to move right to that top line with Kopitar and Kempe. I'm excited for that, which leaves the best second line in the NHL, Trevor Moore, Phil Deneau, Victor Arvidsson together. Arvidsson getting power play one time tonight, which is nice. And that third line, it could be a spicy meatball going forward. Alex Iafallo, Quinton Byfield, Gabe Vilardi. I wish Arthur Kaliev got some top 6 minutes, but this team is just yoked from top to bottom. From a DFS perspective tonight, I'm actually hoping that it is Quick because he's more expensive. And I think people are expecting Cal Peterson because Cal Peterson's kind of a DFS darling and everyone just hates Quick. So if I'm building, Kings lineups and I'm putting in a Kings goalie, I'm building with Quick just because he's more expensive and I can always swap down to Cal Peterson. On the Vegas side, it's probably going to be Logan Thompson, who is not a household name by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a good goalie. So I really like this game. I have big hopes for the Kings this season. What are your takes?
Yeah, I mean, like we did with the Rangers Bolts, let's start with the goalies because it is pretty important. A trend that the Los Angeles Kings started last year was just not naming their starter until warmups hit, which can be pretty brutal for the nights that the backup does go or something like that. They are expecting Jonathan Quick here tonight, though, because he didn't take part in the optional morning skate this morning. Usually that indicates that he's starting. But like you said, just put in the most expensive goalie and then you can drop down.
He's also old, so he might just be getting some R&R,
Yeah, I think he's a year older than me. If he feels like I do, I certainly understand.
Yeah, we're the same age. I could barely walk to the chair. I feel like King Viserys.
Yeah. So Quick actually didn't have a bad season last year. I think if you looked at a lot of numbers, it was about league average, which is kind of the best you can ask for. And if you look at, like I mentioned earlier with the goalie stats, I'll bring that up here real quick. We have Jonathan Quick for the second most saves and the second fewest goals against. So at least by our numbers, we're expecting a good game out of Jonathan Quick here tonight. But like I also mentioned, Logan Thompson looks like he probably will get the highest shot volume. And I bring up the shot volume because it's something that's very important for the Los Angeles Kings. Is last year they were 25th in 5-on-5 scoring and 28th in power play scoring, but they were 5th overall in shots per 60 minutes. They're kind of like the opposite of what we said earlier with Tampa Bay. They take a lot of shots, but they don't score a ton. And I think that's where Kevin Fiala really should help. He's the game breaker they don't have, the offensive game breaker they don't have. If you look at his goals impact over the last few years, it's right in line with guys like Sebastian Aho in Carolina and JT Miller over in Vancouver. So he has elite shot impacts from the wing, and I think he's going to make that top line a lot more dangerous than they were last year. Like I know Adrian Kempe, I think he scored 35 goals, but it was a rotating cast of characters on the top line. Like I remember Dustin Brown retired, and he was even getting some top line minutes last year. So yes. I think Fiala gives them a much needed dimension on that top line that they did not have. But one thing I want to note here is that Fiala is not that great defensively. It's just that he is a wizard in the offensive zone, and Kempe's not very good defensively either. I think for that reason, you might see that top line go out against the second line from Vegas here tonight. And that second line, boy, howdy, are they probably not going to be very good. I was looking at the numbers for the Vegas second line. It has Chandler Stevenson and Max Pacioretty on it. I was looking at their numbers over the last few years, or Chandler Stevenson and Mark Stone, sorry. Looking at the numbers over the last few years without Max Pacioretty, and man, they are bad. 2.2 expected goals for per 62.5 expected goals against. It's 2.9 and 2.3 when he was there. And if, that includes last season when Mark Stone was kind of playing injured at times. But even if you look at 2019 through 2021, it's the same thing. Stevenson and Stone just haven't had good expected goals or goals numbers when Max Pacioretty hasn't been there. And I'm telling you, Brett Howden is not the solution.
Rangers legend, Brett Howden.
Missing Max Pacioretty on that line. I think that, Mark Stone coming back from a serious back injury, I think that line could struggle defensively. And I think that's why I kind of do like that Los Angeles top line here tonight. I really like both the Los Angeles top lines. And in fact, I wrote up the Los Angeles second line in the Power Plays article. The problem with that Los Angeles second line is the finishing was an issue, right? I think Victor Arvidsson shot under 9%. Trevor Moore, who shot a lot last year, is a 10th percentile finisher in the league. Like he was like 358th out of 390 qualified guys over the last over his last 5 seasons. Like it hasn't been great. So they generate a ton of shots, but not a ton of goals. So I kind of like that line, the Los Angeles second line over on DraftKings better. And they're going to go into that Vegas top line. that you mentioned that I think could also struggle defensively, like Jack Eichel.
It's going to be an adventure with Phil Kessel on the line.
If Jack Eichel's back to his usual self from a few years ago, a wizard offensively, great, one of the best offensive players in the league, but defensively, certainly not. And then Phil Kessel has never been a good defensive player, and he's certainly not at his age now. Riley Smith, I think is still a pretty good two-way player, but he can't make up the difference for that whole line. So I think both the top line matchups really favor Los Angeles here. Now, they are carrying a lot of ownership, but again, I think it's just a really good matchup for them. It's just, how does that top line mesh with Kevin Fiala? Do they, maybe need 10 games to get used to each other, get some chemistry or whatever? But I think both those top Los Angeles lines are very much in play here for me. On the Vegas side, what I like best is their third line. I think their third line has a chance of being really, really good. I wrote up William Karlsson in the Power Plays article. I think he gets a misnomered a little bit because he had that 43 goal season like 4 years ago or whatever. But he's a better playmaker than he is a goal scorer at this point. But he can still score 20 goals. Michael Amadio on the other wing. On one wing, I think is an underrated talent in the NHL. Decent playmaker, good impacts offensively, and of course Jonathan Marchessault with them. And Marchessault and Karlsson typically been pretty good together. Last year, 3.5 expected goals for per 60 minutes, scoring 3.4 goals per 60 minutes. I do like that Vegas third line here tonight. On the Vegas side more than I like either of their top two lines. On the blue line, Drew Doughty looks like he could be the highest owned defenseman over on DraftKings. I think he just has a very reasonable price at $5K. But at the same time, he's still, even though he's much more expensive on FanDuel, I think he's still perfectly fine over on FanDuel. He still grades out as one of the better expensive defense options for Los Angeles here tonight, running the top power play unit. Shot a lot more last year as the whole team did. So certainly a double bonus threat over on DraftKings. So I do like Drew Doughty. But, Sean Durzee's the guy that I'm kind of looking at from Los Angeles here. I think he might end up second, maybe third in ice time for the Kings here. And if you look at the ownership that we have here, you see Sean Durzi only at 13% over on FanDuel, only at 12% over on DraftKings. Very, very reasonable ownership here tonight. So I do like Durzi if you don't want to pay all the way up for Doughty. What should be a much chalkier Drew Doughty, and Durzi's probably going to get some second power play minutes as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on Los Angeles here tonight, but I imagine you're like in the second line, much like I am.
Yeah. One of the big things about both these teams last year, they had awful penalty kills. So I'm looking to get in as much power play skaters as possible, which is why I love Durzi, but it's going to be tough to get away from Drew Doughty if I'm doing anything with the Kings because he's only $800 more. It's that power play one time. Shea Theodore, $4,800 power play one. Yeah. So from a 5-on-5 perspective, the Kopitar line might have a better matchup offensively, but the Danault line was just steamrolling everybody last year. Anyway, Victor Arvidsson on his hot power play. So I think you're fine with either of those lines. You want a power play stack, also groovy. I do agree with you on the Vegas side. That Vegas third line going into a young Byfield Velarde, even with Iafallo there, I think, that favors Karlsson Marchessault. So yeah, I'm definitely in on that. They're low owned. They're not priced like third line skaters. So I think that's going to another reason why, the ownership is down, but I think that is my favorite spot, Karlsson Marchessault. I'll save Eichel, Uncle Hot Dog for a better matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it's just a great matchup for that Vegas top line. And I do want to mention, I said there might be a fourth liner. I think there's a couple playable fourth liners in this game. I know Arthur Kaliev is stuck on the fourth line. He's too expensive on FanDuel. I think he's $5K. I think you just pass him there, but I think he's perfectly acceptable over on DraftKings at 3,100. I actually watched one Kings preseason game, and like he looks like he's turning the corner to turn into a star. Like you mentioned him getting into the top 6. It wouldn't surprise me if, December rolls around and the second line is Arvidsson and Danault and Kaliev. It wouldn't surprise me one little bit. So he's getting second power play time. That fourth line actually wasn't that bad last year for the Kings, so don't mind Kaliev. And, of course, Nicholas Roy, fourth line for Vegas, probably going to be getting some top power play time. That's about it from this game. Is there any defenseman that kind of stuck out to you? One guy I want to mention is Alec Martinez over on DraftKings, 3,700. He was injured a bit last year. He's typically a monster shot blocker. I was going through some of his game over the last 2 seasons. He's managed a shot block bonus on DraftKings in just under 50% of his games. It's like 47% of his games. Like this guy blocks shots. If Los Angeles generates as much as we think they could here tonight, he's definitely in line for the shot block bonus. Not too bad for 3,700. Then you hope he can donk an assist or something like that and really smash. Any defenseman sticking out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the power play guys, Theodore, Doughty. But then after that, I think Pietrangelo is completely fine because, Vegas isn't one of those teams that just pushes out their top unit for 2 minutes. Pietrangelo will see power play time as well. Alec Martinez is a nice one-off under 4K on DraftKings. He will be in the running for a block bonus and a broken bone. On the Kings side, Dursey you talked about. Matt Roy, I think, is also fine. But yeah, I'm prioritizing the power play guys.
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't have anything else to cover for the slate. Do you got anything else?
Not really. I mean, I just want to reiterate that, there's 135 you here. Hit the like button, subscribe. It helps us so much. We love giving you free content. We love giving you these free shows. So the more you watch, the more you like, the more you subscribe, the better it is for all of us. The show is sponsored by Prize Picks. We don't really have a show coming up after us today. We're the last show of the day. NBA starting up next week. That's when shows are really going to start going into overdrive. So I guess we can I'll ask you for your hat trick pick. I'm going to ask you for yours first because I have no idea who mine's going to be.
Okay. It's a guy that we just talked about, the line that I like a lot from Vegas. I'm going with Jonathan Marchessault as my hat trick pick here tonight. It's really I'm starting to talk myself into really playing Vegas 3. I think I'm going one lineup tonight. I'm really starting to talk myself into going to Vegas 3. Jonathan Marchessault, my hat trick pick. Who do you got?
I'm going to go really spicy to start the season because I like some spice. I'm going Alexis Lafreniere.
Ooh, I do like that. So we got a couple third liners that we're going to be pulling for here tonight. All right, I like it. My goalie's Logan Thompson. I think there's, he's a rookie. He's got a lot to prove. But Los Angeles could definitely put up 37 shots and only 1 goal or something like that here tonight. So if you're not playing super cheap Igor on DK, I think Logan Thompson's my guy. What about you?
Yeah, I think all 4 goalies are viable tonight. It's not like there's one where you're like, I don't really want to play him. So it really depends on your lineup build. My favorite, honestly, are the late goalies. The early game, the goalies are better, but the shots might not be there. So I like the late goalies. So for my main man, Slim Cliffy, on my right, I am Josh Harris. It's weird to do this ending. I usually just take a breath now, but we'll be back tomorrow for the true opening night slate. I think it's 6 games. I appreciate all your support coming here and watching us for this 2-gamer, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Good luck, everybody.
Okay.